So while I'm here at the laptop right here, I perused and found another paper. Started reading it, got kind of interesting. It sums up a lot of stuff that's um, I've gone over before, but kind of emphasizes some of the points. In fact, since some of the points I actually said yesterday about marriage and about out of wedlock birth rates is in here. I'm not going to go through the whole paper. I'm just going to do the underlying parts about marriage and divorce. So we're just going to quickly go through it. Just going to go through the underlying part because it's like a 20-page paper, and I don't feel like taking the 30, 40 minutes. I should read through the whole paper. So we're going to go through the abbreviated version, just the underlying portions. But this is African American marriage patterns. Douglas J. Besharov and Andrew West. Skipping down to the first portion. Divorce and separation. At the same time that African American women are half as likely to marry as whites, they are more than twice as likely to divorce, which is something that I said in Ren's channel, on her Hangout, and also on mine. You hear that, twin? Although African American divorce rates have been long been higher than those of whites, they are now more so. For example, in 1890, the first year for which national census data are available, the number of divorced women per 1,000 married women was 45% higher for African Americans than for whites, 9 to 6. These are relatively small numbers, but they suggest that even when families on the whole were much stronger than they are today, African American women were still much more likely to face marital disruption. Plus, a lot of times, a lot of married African American women didn't get legally or officially divorced. They got unofficial divorces, which we call walking divorces, or basically long-term separations. So even though they didn't get divorced back there in the 1890s and early 1900s, when say a married couple, black couple, decided to split up, they just left. They just packed their shit and left. So a woman could have one husband and then have 3 or 4 men after that and have children by him. There's cases of that. In fact, this is what they were saying. But also, as E. Franklin Frazier points out, 60 years ago, divorces among rural African Americans most likely were informal agreement between two married people living together, or the de facto result of long-term separations. Thus, it is likely that formal divorces among African Americans were much lower, and perhaps much lower than whites. Formal divorces. Regardless of the reliability of earlier census data, however, the racial difference in divorce is now quite large. By 1998, the African American divorce rate was more than twice as high as the white rate. Separation is about 4 times more common among African Americans than among whites, and about 1.5 times more common than among Hispanics. Skipping down, like I'm telling you, I'm not going to do a thorough thing. It's just something really brief. I'll put I hope I can remember where I got this thing from. I'll put the link in the description so you guys can actually read it yourself. There's something else that I wanted. I think it's down here lower. Let's see where it actually is. It's down here somewhere. There's a lot of data. A lot that said. So we're skipping over quite a bit, but I just want to make a couple points. As we have seen on every measure of marital stability, African Americans do more poorly than whites and Hispanics. The weakness of African American marriages is, however, more acutely viewed as an exacerbated version of decline in marriage across the entire post-industrial Western world, which is something I did say. That these are factors, not only the factors for the decline of marriage, but also divorces and also out of wedlock births. It's a systemic problem. The most broadly accepted explanations for marital breakdown are essentially race blind. See, not just including one sector of people, it's all people. Greater acceptance of non-marital sex and unwed parenthood, as Obsidian would say, which is also something that we talked about. So that young people feel less need to marry. Widespread affluence also makes it easier to leave unhappy marriage. Less emotional and economic gain from the marriage, so there's less reason to get married. And welfare's marriage penalties that discourage low-income couples from getting married, from marrying. Which is also a reason that you have more out-of-wedlock births. And I was just saying that black women have the ability to make independent decisions from their men because of what's going on, the social protections that they get. African Americans do seem especially vulnerable to these worldwide trends, however. What can it be about African Americans or their more than 3 centuries living on this continent that has made them so vulnerable to the forces that weaken families? A number of factors seem to be at work. The devastating effects of slavery and Jim Crow laws on black marriages. Endemic poverty, which puts additional stress on already weak families. Even fewer gains from marriage. In other words, because of our historic cultural damage that has been wrought over 3 centuries, slavery, and then Jim Crow, these are the effects that happen on the black family that makes what the general population do or the greater society do as far as welfare and these other kinds of policies that are set in place, birth control, all that kind of crap. It makes it worse for whom? African American women and African American men. Because those problems were already there. Your divorce rates were already higher. Out of wedlock rates were already higher. So that was an underlying condition already. What they did was make it worse. Made it worse for everybody, but the thing is, the weakest group of the whole pie was the African Americans that just blew them out of the water, which is why you see what you see. Anyway, that's all I wanted to show you, something real brief. I didn't want to do a whole paper. So, I'll try to put the link in the description if I can. If I don't, I'll put it in the comments section. But anyway, this has been another Sidney Pettier production, Petty Pendergrass LLC. Hold this L again, twin. Peace.